Dear viewers, thanks you for joining us in this edition of the news on Equinoxe Television, live from our headquarters in Cameroon's economic capital, Douala. I am Babla Jonathan. In our top stories in this edition of the news, international pressure is mounting on the government of the Republic of Cameroon to reveal the whole truth in the death of Samuel Wazizi, journalist with CMTV in Boya, southwest region of the Republic of Cameroon. And Equinoxe Television is confirming that Samuel Wazizi died between the 20th and the 30th of August 2019, and the United Nations Resident Coordinator and Humanitarian Coordinator for Cameroon condemns continuous attacks on humanitarian workers in the northwest and southwest regions of the country. Stay with us. Thanks, dear viewers, for joining us on this edition of the news on Equinoxe Television. We begin with news concerning the death of journalist Samuel Wazizi of CMTV in the southwest region of Chief Town, Boya. And Equinoxe Television confirms that Samuel Wazizi died between the 20th and the 30th of August 2019, and not recently as reported on the internet. And Samuel Wazizi, our sources indicate that he arrived in the nation's political capital, Yaoundé, in a critical health condition and was immediately transported to the military hospital in Yaoundé for medical attention, and he died in less than 24 hours of 48 hours after his arrival at the Yaoundé military hospital. And since then, nobody, since his arrest and detention in the southwest region of the country and later transferred to Yaoundé, information on his whereabouts and what was happening to him remained a secret, confined within military circles in the Republic of Cameroon. And now international pressure is mounting on the Cameroon government to reveal the truth and the whole truth. The International Federation of Journalists has issued a statement demanding that government should carry out a complete investigation into the death of Samuel Wazizi and reveal nothing but the whole truth. And the Committee to Protect Journalists, CPJ, as well as the Cameroon English-Speaking Journalists Association and the National Trade Union of Journalists in Cameroon, are all demanding for justice. The last two national organizations of journalists had given the government of Cameroon till 6 p.m. today to issue a statement, or more energetic actions will be undertaken by journalists in the country to unveil the truth behind the death of Samuel Wazizi and, of course, obtain justice in that case. And some administrative authorities have started distancing themselves from that incident. Today, some journalists in the southwest region of Chief Town, Boya, marched on the streets of the town to the governor's office to demand for truth on the case of Samuel Wazizi. And information streaming in from our correspondents in the southwest region of the country say the governor of the southwest region, Bernard Okalia Bilai, washed his hands off the Samuel Wazizi matter, so to speak. And he says that only the administration of Yaoundé or administrative authorities in Yaoundé can speak on that case. Governor Bernard Okalia Bilai says that Wazizi left Boya in a good health condition, and he doesn't know what happened to him in the nation's capital, Yaoundé. And he also adds that he cannot ask the Yaoundé administration what happened to Wazizi because he was arrested for terrorism, and he cannot interfere. And talking to the press today, some leaders of journalism associations in the Southwest Regional Chieftain. The governor also indicated that the Cameroon English or the journalist was arrested in Boya and transferred to Yaoundé, and of course he cannot intervene in that matter. And some of the journalists spoke to Équinoxe Television. Take a listen to Chief Kemanya Paul. He is a publisher and the president of the Commonwealth English-Speaking Journalists Association for Cameroon and vice president for Africa. Take a listen.
We came here to find out from His Excellency the Governor of the Southwest what has happened to Samuel Wazizi. And when we got in there, were with security operatives, the Attorney General of the region, the Secretary General, and I happens to be the one to address them first. The governor made it abundantly clear. Wazizi was arrested by the police on the 2nd of order you to send this person there. So I want to appeal to you people, we must not relent in this issue. We must find out whether Wazizi is truly dead, or if he's dead, where is Wazizi's corpse? I spoke in the governor's office in tears as I saw President Barack Obama in good health. So all he knows is that Wazizi left the region in good health. As to whether he is dead or not, it is Yaoundé that can answer that question. But when I press hard that Wazizi, we first got the news on Equinoxe Television that Wazizi died some 5 to 6 months ago, and the governor maintained she lives on the issue of whether or not he knows that he's already dead. So he has pushed us to Yaoundé. It is he is a regional governor. He is aware that the young man was arrested. He is aware he was taken to the police. He is aware they took him to the military. He is aware he was escorted to Yaoundé. But Yaoundé has the rest of the story. And we have assured him that Cameroon is our country. We shall follow up Wazizi's case until we know where he ended. Either he is still a corpse or alive, we will follow up. This is what I think I told the governor. And I quoted the venerated human rights crusader Martin Luther King, who said, injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. And I pick pins with the authorities that a man should not have been arrested and just bundled to Yaoundé, refused from being seen by his colleagues, by his lawyers, by his family members. No, but because you carry a gun or you carry what, don't bully. Otherwise, if Cameroon was one country, we would have called for nationwide lockdown of the press. But unfortunately, it is not. It cannot happen. It can happen in Nigeria, where they have one union, Nigerian Union of Journalists. But in Cameroon, if you do it, CRTV will not obey. Maybe Cameroon TV will not obey. Other government will not obey. We are talking about people's life. And the last thing I said was that COVID-19 is already showing us signs on how the judgment day will look like. Because there is no head of state, no servant, no rich man, no poor man. On the judgment day, everybody will answer. There will be no state council, there will be no judge, there will be no lawyer to defend anybody. It will be you and God. That's how I ended up with them. And of course, I did thank the governor for receiving us in his conference room instead of talking to us outside here.
Yes, Mr. President.
Please permit me to take him.
That was Chief Nkemanyang Paul. He's a publisher and president of the Commonwealth English-speaking Commonwealth Journalists Association for Cameroon and vice president for Africa, speaking to the press shortly after the meeting with the governor of the Southwest region, Benau Kalebilai. The vice president of the Cameroon English-speaking Journalists Association, ETV's Davison Maimo, said the fight to obtain justice and an end to such impunity against journalists and all citizens in Cameroon must continue. And now we are going over to New York in the United States of America, where our first guest in this edition of the news is joining us, Metro Aneneba Innocent Akufo, who is an attorney and counselor at law and human rights defender and a major proponent of decolonization. Metro Aneneba Innocent Akufo, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you so much, Mr. Babile, for inviting me today on Equinoxe TV.
All right. Now, you have been you're aware of what's been happening in the Cameroon in the past days or the past months. Journalists arrested and detained incommunicado for close to a year and later declared dead. And from all indications, from all information streaming in from our sources within the ranks of the military in Cameroon, he died on between the 20th and the 30th of August 2019. What's your take on all this?
Yeah, Mr. Babila, I think this is a script we've seen all over again, whether it's in Cameroon, in other African countries, or here in the United States, where the speakers of truth become the enemy of the people. And I was so shocked for having learned about the death of Mr. Wazizi, because I closely follow him on Equinoxe TV just as well as yourself. It's a great news channel because it actually tells the society where the people are or what the people actually demand from the authorities. To silence a voice like Mr. Wazizi's, that's gross inhuman. I just don't have the words to actually explain it, how it actually happened. Because this is somebody with his pen and his paper, with his training and his upbringing, was primed to present the information the way it is. But he was abducted and finally killed somewhere, in a prison in Yaoundé or some other part of Cameroon. This is not something we should tolerate in the 21st century. Because the more information we have, the more knowledge we have about our society, about our government to hold them responsible, it is the best. The previous speaker actually said, Dr. King, Martin Luther King, who happens to be born here in Atlanta where I am, a resident, actually said, if you actually stifle truth, you actually put it in some sort of a bubble, it will eventually come out, and it comes out in a steam. It will burn everybody, even the person who is trying to protect that particular truth. So it is an absolute travesty to justice that the authorities handled Mr. Wazizi and he ended up dying in detention. And we don't know if he's dead, according to the previous speaker. That's something that the governor knew where he was. If this is somebody who was answerable to the truth, answerable to the laws of Cameroon, he would have absolutely followed through to see exactly where Mr. Wazizi was or where he is and actually come with this information. You should not be waiting for the Attorney General. He is the governor of the Southwest, of that part of Cameroon, and he should absolutely be the first person to summon a commission of inquiry to see exactly where Mr. Wazizi is. If he's dead, bring the body, bring the couple so we can see it. If he's not dead, bring the person. I know lawyers have actually tried to do, habeas to see if they can bring the body to court, but nobody brought that person. So again, this is an ingrained system of injustice, ingrained system of disrespect for authority, ingrained system of, tribal politics that plagues Cameroon, it plagues Africa, and it plagues humanity. And we will never move an inch forward if we decide to go the direction in which we are going.
Barrister, as a legal mind, what's your analysis of the fact that he died several months ago, between the 20th and the 30th of August 2019, and this was kept secret. The lawyers knew nothing about his whereabouts or what was happening to him, and the fact that he was tortured to death.
Well, Mr. Babylon, again, we always, for me, I'm an attorney, and I always go with the facts where the facts lead me. From the previous caller or the previous speaker, we don't know whether Mr. Wazizi is actually dead or not. Let's make the presumption dead, or let's have the presumption that he is not actually with us anymore. He's dead. Now, if you have an attorney, automatically society is supposed to protect that relationship between you and your client. Whatever transpires between your client, you should have absolutely right to have access to that client to see exactly what's going on. So the fact that he had lawyers and these lawyers did not have access to that person, it is absolutely a travesty of justice. And again, I have to tell you, this is why our societies are where they are right now, because we never respect the rule of law. We don't respect the Constitution. We don't respect the written laws that our parliamentarians or our senators are endowed to enshrine unto us. And we end up, in a dictatorship. Because Dr. King said, you cannot structure a society where there is democracy for a few and dictatorship for the others. So that's exactly what it is. If his lawyers, if there is we have to look for a forensic pathologist to see exactly if we have the body at all, to see exactly when this guy died. If he died in August, if he died in September, October, or if he's not even dead. This is the responsibility of the government. And this is what has shown us for generations, and it is still continuing. And it appalls me that you have people in power, people that you think they're learned enough, people who are smart enough to do the right thing, and they still do not do it because they want to protect a very myopic interest, an interest that is so central to an ideology which is based on greed and protection of a tribal faith.
Is there any legal explanation to the fact that somebody is tortured while still a suspect or not, even those who have been tried and condemned? Is there any legal explanation for torture to the extent of taking away the detainee's life?
Well, Mr. Babila, I would have to answer that question from a premise of the Constitution that I know, which I work under, which is the Constitution of the United States. You have the First Amendment, you have the First Amendment, the Second, the Third Amendment. You have the Fourth Amendment, which the right for you not to be unduly searched. The Fifth Amendment, where you cannot absolutely give information that will incriminate you. And of course, the Sixth Amendment, which absolutely gives you a right to protection of counsel. You cannot do anything to somebody without doing that. But in Cameroon, where fortunately I had studied when I had my first degree in law, I think there is a penal code in which, it gives somebody the universal right, of counsel, the universal right of protection. You cannot just take people and torture them because the presumption is everybody is innocent until you're found guilty in the court of law. We don't practice it. Mr. Wazizi happened to be in the English-speaking part of Cameroon, which is common law. And this is something that we fail to understand. There has never been a mix of these two systems. He's been ingrained in a system where you require your administrators, the administrators of justice, to presume you're innocent if you're found guilty. And that's how he takes life, not in a situation where you apply a Napoleonic code, which is the contrary of common law. And I think this is where we go wrong. You don't take people, even if if there is probable cause for you to arrest them, you have to have a grand jury convened to see if that person is actually found guilty. You don't just take them and you are the police, you decide to execute the law and on that person without due process. It is absolutely not correct.
And the death of Samuel Wazizi kind of confirms what Ambassador Chiombori, former African Union ambassador to the United States of America, said in reaction to the killing of George Floyd in the United States of America. And she said that Africans are tortured not only in America, not only in other parts of the world. They are maltreated even on the African continent by other Africans.
Well, Mr. Babila, you know, growing up back in my village in Santa, and I did absolutely understand the power of education, understanding different cultures and understanding different societies. In the United States, about 150 years ago, there was emancipation. But emancipation did not absolutely mean that there were rights, equal rights between the white person, the Indian, and the black person, or the Hispanic. It has never happened that way. But if we have to delve in the African continent, we look at black on black crime in the United States, we make that comparison. But if you look at Africa itself, if you look at Cameroon, for example, there is an ongoing civil war in Cameroon between the government, I won't say the people of Cameroon and another part of Cameroon. It is an ingrained fight between the government trying to protect the status quo against the other part of that particular country, which is what that particular injustice, that racist mentality, it is what has kept us long downtrodden as a people. And if the ambassador, which it's a lady I absolutely respect so much, is saying that, she's saying that from experience growing up in Zimbabwe, because she saw how white and blacks live together. At some point, when the black person had power, it turned to oppression. You know, they did everything to weave that power away from the black person. But again, you have to understand that that society is your society. That land is your land. You have to protect that land for posterity. You cannot tribally sectionalize Cameroon or whichever African society you're in because you want to favor a particular white minority or some other people in the West. That's the error we've made, and that's exactly where we are in servitude today. If you talk about George Floyd, it's not just George Floyd. There were many of them before his particular day. You have Emmett Till, you have LaQuan McDonald, you have right here in Atlanta, you have Ahmaud Arbery, who was killed by 3 white people just because he was jogging in a white neighborhood. I mean, he was jogging not in a white neighborhood, just because of the color of his skin. So if these people, if they are doing this to the black, I fully just don't understand why they give you guns and ammunition to kill your same black brothers because you want to protect the white man's interest in Cameroon itself. The land is your land, it is not a white man's land. So it perturbs me so much.
All right, in the case of the United States of America, the killing of George Floyd, when you look at this and other incidents of this nature, attacks on blacks in the United States of America, what is it like to be an African in the U.S. today?
Well, you know, fortunately for me in particular, I speak to myself because I wrote a book called The Land We Leave Behind, you know, and I actually explained in that book that the only person who can tell the African story, or the only person who can tell the African American story, is the African or the African American. You being a black in America, black in the sense that you're from Africa, when you come to the United States, the first person you actually, you know, gravitate towards is the African American, because you look at the color of his skin. They might be culturally different from us, which it is true, they are culturally very different from us, and linguistically and economically they're absolutely different from us, but ethnically we are the same. We are the same people. So if you look at the African, myself in particular, in the United States, you know, we tread on the footsteps of the civil rights leaders. In Atlanta, we have somebody like John Juin, who marched with Martin Luther King Jr. Those are the people that we follow. Look at them and we look at the examples that they had charted for African Americans, and we follow that particular process. Because you have to find a place in this particular society. Otherwise, as I said in the beginning, the democracy will be for the white people and the dictatorship will be for the black people. And if you are black, you're considered black. Even if you're 1% black, 1% white or 90% black, you are still considered black. So in that particular case, we throw it very carefully, but we absolutely know, because the dust of racism is in the United States. It had never gone. It was the original sin in the Constitution, although we've got amendments like the 13th Amendment of the United States, which took away slavery. But Frederick Douglass said emancipation did not absolutely take away the entire mentality of slavery, because you took them away from the cottage and put them where they were not. They were hungry, they were homeless, and they were still dependent on the same system that persecuted them. Those who persecuted them gave them land. I mean, they gave land to the masters, but did not give land to the oppressed that they freed. So these people they were paupers, and they are paupers still today. No matter what, we have to absolutely try to desegregate America, institutionalize equality in its institutions, both the judiciary, especially the judiciary, because if you look at the current system right now, where the President of the United States appoints very conservative judges into the judiciary. And for the benefit of time, Mr. Babila, our speakers have to understand that there is something called the original United States Constitution, which there are 8 articles, Article 1 to Article 8, and that's where slavery was enshrined. But you have amendments to that particular constitution, and that's where the 13th and the 14th Amendment came, which absolutely freed the slaves. But again, you have originalist judges who absolutely believe in the original Constitution of the United States. And that's why we think that it is ingrained in there and it is not going anywhere anytime soon.
All right, before we go into a few seconds, what's the situation over there now?
Well, we've been protesting in Atlanta. Our mayor came out strongly and said, you know, people should not be looting, which is something we don't even ascribe to, you know, because it shrouds that particular idea of George Floyd's death, because we want equal justice, we want equal dignity in the United States. Not that one race should be superior, because America is a multiracial society. We want everybody to be equal. So it is still 10. This is the 9th. I mean, today will be the 10th day of protest, and I don't see it whittling down anytime soon.
Thanks, Maître Aniniba Innocent Akufo. You are an attorney and counselor at law in the United States of America, and you're a human rights defender. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you so much, Mr. Babida.
Now we're coming back to Cameroon, and we're taking you to the northwest region of the Republic of Cameroon, where 2 daughters of a separatist general are now in the hands of security and defense forces. They were captured during an operation in that part of the country, as the situation continues deepening, with government continuing with its military crackdown on separatists in the 2 Anglophone regions of the country. Stella reports from Bamenda.
What is described by the highest authority of the 5th Joint Military Region as Operation Barefoot Phase 2, aimed at halting the activities of the separatist fighters. 2 sisters who confirmed they are daughters to Ngwase Dunjiyang, otherwise known as General Alaji, were rescued by the military.
I was just in the house sleeping in the night. I went daybreak in the morning at 5 o'clock. I just heard the way they were shooting gun in our house. So I just get up and I went to see it was the militaries that were in our house. So after then, they just took me and came with me here.
The soldiers on mission had targeted the home of the Ambazonian General Alaji at Acheni, a locality in Barefoot.
My father was, first of all, he's a native doctor from since. Before now, he's a soldier now. So I'm seeing him moving with guns.
These girls, names withheld and their identities protected at their request, have expressed the wish to regain normal life out of their village.
I've begged the big man that please, you should just let me go to Douala and go and meet my sisters there. Me, I wanted to go sing, but my father refused. He took my ID card, so there's nowhere for me to go.
More vulnerable these 2 have become. There are many trapped in villages of the northwest and southwest regions with no access to health care, food or shelter. Dreams are being shattered as the war drags on in Anglophone Cameroon. Tomorrow's experts may be rare to come by if this tarries for too long. Visiting the troops who had carried out the Barefoot Phase 2 mission were Brigadier Generals Cavalier and Équinoxe Divine of the 5th Joint Military and the 5th Gendarmerie regions, who stressed on the need for the population to collaborate with the soldiers.
have to reassure the population that we are here to secure and protect them. But we need the collaboration to denounce those ambers, because they are the ones suffering.
While saluting the troops on their bravery in the face of the conflict, Brigadier General Cavalier and the Congolese Divine cautioned the soldiers on the need to also fight the coronavirus pandemic. By examples, they reminded the soldiers of hand washing with soap and running water as a measure of limiting the spread.
Bustela reporting there from the northwest region of the Republic of Cameroon. And still in the northwest region, the United Nations resident and humanitarian coordinator for Cameroon, Allegra Bauchi, and the Human Rights Watch senior researcher for Central Africa, Ilaria Allegrosi, have condemned the continuous and increasing attacks on humanitarian workers in the northwest and in the northwest region of the country, indicating that in recent times many humanitarian workers are attacked by separatists in the northwest region of the country, and they are also being subjected to some abuse committed by elements of the national armed forces within the context of the deepening Anglophone crisis in the northwest and southwest regions of the country. And the United Nations resident coordinator and humanitarian coordinator in Cameroon is joining us from Yaoundé. Good evening. Thanks for joining us today, and we're talking about the situation of humanitarian workers in the northwest region of the country. You issued a statement on that. What is the actual situation on the ground?
Well, thank you for inviting me. I think as some of the people you were interviewing earlier on, you can hear that the population is still affected by the violence ongoing. And this has been going on, I think, as you said, for years. But in the last few months, we really have seen increase in attacks. And that's why I was forced to put this out, because this is just unsustainable for us. And it comes at a time when we need to actually be doing more to respond to COVID. So it's unacceptable and absurd that as we're trying to scale up to help more people in need, we are actually facing an even greater pushback from actors on the ground. And as I said in my statement, in the last 2 months, we know of 6 humanitarian organizations that had their staff held, kidnapped, abducted, tortured. And this is only what we know. And I know there's a lot more violence going on in those regions. And so I think we're trying our best to reach people in need, but that means that we have to be respected. Humanitarian action, I've said it over and over again, is neutral, impartial, and it has to be respected. It's our humanitarian principles. So we're really calling on all the actors on the ground to allow safe, secure access to humanitarian workers, because as we know, there are millions of people who need help. And we estimate that there's about 1.8 million people in the 2 regions that need assistance. I think earlier you mentioned the lack of access to health, the lack of access to water, shelter, education remains an issue. And if you also look at the impact of the crisis in the neighboring regions, that figure goes up to 3 million. We're on the ground. We have about 50 humanitarian organizations that want to help, that are trying their best, but they have to do that in an environment that protects them and ensures their safety. Thank you.
When you're talking about attacks on humanitarian workers and abuse by forces of defense and security of Cameroon in the northwest region of the country, what exactly are you referring to?
Well, what we're seeing actually is an increase of harassment on illegal checkpoints. We're seeing an increase of abductions and kidnapping by non-state armed groups, whether they are secessionist groups or not. There's also a lot of criminal groups operating in the area. So we're not here to define what they are, but we know what is happening to us. And so increasingly we have staff, cars that are taken away, some of our equipment, is also being held, equipment that we need to protect. And we're also seeing an increased use of ID and exploded ordinances. We're seeing, as we know, the ghost towns is a huge issue because ability to move and ability to reach healthcare at a time when we most need it is impaired. And this is a time when we actually, what we're trying to do is support the efforts to decentralize the COVID response, get more testing in the regions, get more protective equipment in the region. So in fact, we need even more access than what we had before. And as I said, that's why we are really calling out on all the actors on the ground to ensure a safe passage.
Were some of the humanitarian workers attacked in the northwest region physically assaulted by the attackers?
Absolutely. I mean, in the past, as you know, we've actually lost 2 colleagues already. But of these recent attacks, absolutely, they come with harassment and fear. As you know, sometimes this is about ransoms, and the way to get ransom is to really instill a lot of fear in the people you're held. And so there's obviously a lot of trying to explain who humanitarian actors are and why they need to be protected. Humanitarian action often takes place in areas of violence. As you know, we're also working in the extreme north with Boko Haram, working in the east, we're working in Central African Republic. So we are used to working in a context of violence, and that's why we have these humanitarian principles. And it's so important that anybody who bears arms protects us and allows our passage, because if you stop us, you are actually stopping assistance from reaching people who need it. So we also need the support of the communities to really work with us and enable our access, because ultimately the ones who are suffering the most are the ones that we are not able to reach. And that's why it's also a message that not only has to come from me, but it also has to really come from the communities to make sure that our passage is guaranteed.
What's the gravity and the frequency of the abuse committed by security and defense forces against some of the humanitarian workers?
Well, again, what we have right now, we have 6 attacks. These are done by non-state armed groups, and these were specifically abductions. But we also track every time we are stopped at a checkpoint, whether it's illegal or illegal checkpoints, every time we are asked to give bribes, every time that we are asked, to hold our trucks for 1, 2, 3 days. As you know, in the past, humanitarian action has been accused of fueling the conflict, of financing terrorism, which of course are accusations that we have rejected, but that has meant that there's a very high level of inspection of the work that we do, which is not, we've always said that we're open and transparent, but that means that there are often delays of when our assistance can reach the people in need.
What information have you received from those who were abducted by non-state armed groups? Was it just about the money, the ransom, or they were demanding for other things?
It depends on the different cases. Sometimes it's just not knowing who we are, not knowing what our objectives are, so assuming that we're there to do something else. We have been accused, as I said, of either financing terrorists or on spying on non-state armed groups. But a lot of the times it is about ransom. It is also a criminality issue. And so that's why, in our case, but of course, at the same time, while we ask for our protection, one of our key appeals is to protect all civilians, because, and I think listening to the people you were interviewing just before, there's a high level of suffering in these 2 regions, so our call is to protect humanitarian action, because it tries to protect people, but ultimately is all civilians should be spared from ongoing violence. The Secretary General has called for a global ceasefire and a cessation of hostilities around the world, because we need right now, as we said, to have full access, and we need to focus on fighting COVID. And so ongoing conflict and violence is really a huge hindrance for our ability to fight COVID. As you know, in those 2 regions, we have already about 300 cases, and cases countrywide are going up. So this is really the time to reinforce our efforts to fight COVID, and for that we need access. And that's why the Secretary General has asked on all armed actors across the globe, for a global ceasefire.
how badly are your efforts to reach out to the needy population of the northwest region of the country and even the southwest affected by these constant and increasing attacks on the humanitarian workers?
Very badly, because in the last 2 weeks we've actually had to stop all movement because we had received direct threats. This was specifically towards the UN, and every time one of these incidents happen, not only the activity of that organization is affected, but all movement in that region has to be stopped. So also other organizations that are likely to take that road or to go to that area will not do so until we reestablish access. So it creates huge delays on our ability to deliver, but it also creates a climate of fear where humanitarian workers really don't want to work anymore, and where donors are also not ready to finance because we cannot assure that our work get to the people who are most in need. So where there are high inefficiencies and big delays, it becomes very complicated for us to continue to operate.
Globally, what's the situation, the humanitarian situation on the ground in the two Anglophone regions of the country? Approximately how many people are in need of humanitarian aid, and what are their living conditions? How are their living conditions?
Yes, well, our last estimates, as I said before, is about 1.8 million people who have some form of need, and it could be health, it could be shelter, it could be protection. There's a lot of people who are actually needing food assistance right now. So we have about 1.8 in the two regions, but of course the neighboring regions have also been affected because they have received internally displaced people, which have also created an impact on that region. So globally the crisis has affected about 3 million people. And this is only one of the situations we're working in Cameroon, because we also have huge needs in the extreme north, where, as you know, the attacks on Boko Haram continue, and Cameroon is hosting hundreds of thousands of refugees in the east. So we also have to think that we are working across different operations. And the COVID crisis has increased these needs. We're actually revising our figures and seeing that the impact of COVID, that means that these figures are actually going up and not going down.
All right. Thanks so much, Allegra Bauchi, United Nations resident coordinator and coordinator or humanitarian coordinator in the Cameroon. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you.
All right, on to something else now. At least 8 persons have died in a road accident close to Ngaoundéré in the Adamawa region of the Republic of Cameroon. The accident occurred earlier today, and last night 3 persons died in another accident in the Kutaba in the west region of Cameroon. Smart Jikan Gebre has more.
Another ghastly road accident takes away the lives of 3 civilians on our major highway. This is Kutaba, where the population is in tears after a private vehicle without a matriculation number had a head-on collision with a commercial bike. On the spot, 35-year-old Yusufa Abdullahi, the bike rider, died, while 32-year-old Ajara and 8-year-old Awawu, who were his passengers, later gave up the ghost at the Kutaba District Hospital. The absence of speed brakes on this highway from Fumban to Kutaba, many say, is the cause of the numerous accidents, saying government is neglecting important things.
From Kutaba to Fumban, no go slow, no day.
From Kutaba to Fumban, no speed brake is available. Reasons why people die always.
If you take control, if you self-race on the other side, it don't be free. So that is a government.
The drivers drive carelessly. Government is also to be blamed for neglecting their duty.
Because for now, the level land where Go slow be supposed to be.
On the other hand, the road users have also been blamed for not respecting the speed they are supposed to run.
C'est l'incivisme des usagers de la route.
The driver of the Avansis car that was involved in the accident, who ran away for fear that he would be lynched to death, has now reported himself to the security forces in Kutaba. Meanwhile, the population of Kutaba burnt the car out of anger.
And this is where we end this edition of the news on Equinoxe Television. Thanks for staying with us.